Good evening, good people. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ashley Woodard Henderson. My homies call me Ash. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the proud co-executive director of the historic Highlander Research and Education Center in Newmarket, Tennessee. And you are joining us for a fantastic panel where you're not only going to get some making meaning of the moment, some intensive education from some of the most brilliant Black women in labor, but you're also going to leave this panel with some conversation about what you can do to support the ongoing fight for Black labor and workers' rights. So I hope you are in the right place, and I'm excited to jump into tonight's festivities. Before we jump in, I just want to say unequivocally that we know that there are converging and quite frankly, scaling contradictions in this country and in the world right now. That the number of crises that we're seeing, whether that's court decisions, the continued anti-Blackness from police and the courts, the attack on Black women and Black people as a whole, transgender, nonconforming and intersex folks, disabled folks, et cetera. We know that you are coming to this call pissed off and tired. But we also know that you're bringing an eternal and informed optimism about what we can do to see the liberation of Black people in our lifetime. And so we don't find it small that you decided that you were going to take time out of your busy schedule with these converging crises happening all around you to spend some time with us talking about the future of Black labor. So I want to thank you for being here. And I want to thank the incredible Black women. Y'all don't even know this, like the amount of power that you're going to get over the next little bit. So I'm excited to bring to the screen with me some of the baddest Black women in the game, people whose work I follow, folks who I celebrate, people who have been doing this work for quite some time and continue to be the reason that my optimism is informed about the future of Black workers. So without further ado, I'm excited to bring some of my comrades who I've met through the Movement for Black Lives and others who I've met in the streets fighting for worker justice. Before I bring them, though, I would be remiss not to shout out the incredible leadership of my colleagues and comrades in the Movement for Black Lives. So from the policy table to the organizing table, mass engagement and strategy, to ending patriarchal violence and the organizing table, all of our comrades who are doing leadership development and direct actions, the comms team and all of our staff, for every single person who sees themselves as a member, an organizational member, an individual member of our ecosystem. Thank you so much for all the work that you do across this country to make sure that all Black lives matter and that we see the liberation of our people, healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities for Black people. I'm grateful to be one in the number with you. I also want to remind you that throughout this call, we're going to be encouraging you to text the word labor, LABOR, to 90975 so you can learn more about the Black Worker Bill of Rights, which you're going to hear about in a second, and InfraBL's vision for a liberated future for all Black workers and an economy that works for all of our people. Again, text the word labor to 90975. Now, without any other, I think the decorum is set. So without further ado, I'm going to bring my homies to the room. Tiffany Flowers, please join me. What's up, sis? Tell the people who you are, where you're calling in from, and the set that you rep.
Hello, my dear sister. Hello, viewers, audience, and family. My name is Tiffany Flowers. I am repping Baltimore at this point, but have lived in many parts of America as part of my life in labor. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently the campaign director of the Frontline. I'm a brown-skinned Black woman with brown frames on, a red headband, a red lip, and I cannot wait to get into this discussion.
Big ups to you, and thanks so much for their inclusivity. Thanks for modeling. Taylor Davis, come on in the room. Tell the people who you are, your set, and where you're calling in from.
Yes, my name is Taylor Davis. My pronouns are they, them, and she, her. I'm an organizer with the National Black Workers Center, originally from the 757, Norfolk, Virginia. Spent some time up in DC, but now I'm currently in Durham, North Carolina, Bull City, and working with the National Black Workers Center, which is an organization that is dedicated to ending racism and discrimination for Black folks in the workplace. I'm very excited to be here.
Fantastic. I feel like all my Spirit House tribe would be mad if I didn't throw up the bull for Durham. So shout out to all of y'all. It's a bunch of y'all in Durham that are probably watching tonight. Shout out to each of you. Roxy, come on in the room. Tell us who you are.
Hey, everybody. My name is Roxy Nelson. I am an officer with 1199 SEIU. We are the largest healthcare workers union in America. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I represent people from New Jersey because, you know, I'm from there, but I was born on the island of Grenada. So I represent immigrant people from islands. And I currently live in Florida. Don't feel sad for me, but we're excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
We're so excited that you are here, Roxy. Thanks for being here. And Sherika, round us out, comrade.
Thank you, Ash. Sharika Carter, I use she, her pronouns. I'm an unapologetic Black woman, and so I'm here with my gap tooth smile and a purple lip today. I'm the Political and Strategic Campaigns Director of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO, and I've been a union member for over half of my life. I'm a leader in this movement because of folks who look like me, with a little country twang in their voices. And so my work building power, worker power, and winning on the job in our communities and winning politically for working people, it is for folks who look like me and for 16-year-old Sharika who walked into the union hall for the first time and did not see anyone who looked like her. And so she will be so proud of how far our movement has come. And I'm so excited to be here with y'all today. This is special for sure.
Awesome. And just to make sure I got everybody, Taylor, did I call on you? Have you gone yet?
Yeah, you got me.
Okay, I thought so. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure everybody had gotten to introduce. So listen, what I know, fam, is that some of our folks haven't been in these conversations about Black workers and Black labor as a sector of the Black liberation movement, right? Even though we know that for as long as Black people have been here, folks have been organizing around Black work, right? Whether that's the origin of the abolitionist movement and the fight against chattel slavery, or you know, I'm an Appalachian, so I've got to talk about like the March on Blair Mountain, right? That a time where the state literally raised arms against its own citizens because Black people and poor white folks were organizing in the mines. On and on and on, we can talk about the just like incredible work of Black leadership in the worker and labor movement, not only in a US context, but globally. But what we know too is that like when most people think about labor, they think about white folks. They don't think about us. So I want to start us thinking about the role that Black organizers have played in labor rights fights and workers' rights struggle throughout the history of this country. And Taylor, if you don't mind, I'd really love it if you kicked us off.
No, thank you. I think what you said really definitely speaks to the misconception around labor, that it is a white issue. But when you really think about it and you approach it with a historical context, there's Black laborers or Black people's labor has lied at the bedrock of this nation, starting with the exploitation of Black labor during the practice of slavery. So in response to that exploitation, Black folks have always found a way to organize themselves and fight back, whether it be through slave rebellions or a strong and consistent abolitionist movement. So we have always been a part of the conversation and really moving it primarily as opposed to our white or non-Black counterparts. So, this legacy of resistance and organizing has really been consistent throughout history. And it can be seen, even after slavery, in the antebellum period, when it comes to the Black laundresses, women who were called washing Amazons in Atlanta in the late 1800s, who advocated for their own fair wages. There are folks that create their own spaces outside of the traditional white union spaces. Specifically, I want to highlight some folks that are the originators for the National Black Workers Center, the Black Workers for Justice. Some Black women who were Kmart workers in 1981 who decided that they were fed up and done with the conditions that they were working under and said no more. And they created a Black Worker Center, a dynamic and innovative approach to addressing the issues that they were facing as Black women workers specifically. So, Black workers in this country have always had an intimate understanding of how these predatory labor practices affect them. And we've always had innovative and principled approaches to changing our conditions and really elevating the position of Black workers, which ultimately, benefits all workers because, when Black people are elevated, everybody is elevated. So, Black organizing has really taken place at the kitchen table, at beauty and barbershops, at the church. And we may not have called it organizing specifically, but that's what it was, and we are proud of that legacy, and I'm excited to see it moving forward and really developing and growing as we're experiencing our current moment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Taylor. I want to open it up for anybody else that has anything to say to this question before I move us to the next, but just to say, particularly to the Workers Center and to Black Workers for Justice, that the concept of social justice unionism really, really, really and truly came from some of those folks from the New Left that were organizing in a 20th century context in the South of all places, to be able to build intersectional lens around what it looks like to be not only a worker, but to be a Black one. And what that means in the context of a holistic Black liberation struggle, right? You don't get Black liberation without Black workers, right?
I'm gonna add to that
without Black liberation. Yeah,
and I'm gonna add to that. You don't get Black liberation without Black women.
Come on now.
So I'm reminded of ancestors like Dora Lee Jones and the Domestic Workers Union of Harlem, which was seen as literally one of the first steps to truly ending domestic slavery in America. And it was 1934.
Yeah.
Right. So to your point about what we do and what we don't get and where it comes from, let's also take this moment to reflect on the legacy of resistance. Ever since we got here, we've been working. And ever since we got here, working and not being paid, we've been strategizing on how to change that condition. And a lot of my peace has come from that over the last 48 hours as we're dealing with another facet of the fight. But I just want to lift up some of the organizers of the past and our ancestors, right, who've modeled this resistance from then until now. I think about people like Cleola Brown. I think about Melanie Campbell, right? I think about people that are here right now, Black women who paved the way, who showed people like me that it was possible. And to Sharika's point, when I got to the labor movement, Cleola Brown was in the room and Melanie Campbell was in the room, right? And so the progress of the blood and the sweat and the tears of our ancestors, just wanted to throw that in.
Yes, Roxy, Sharika, come on in.
Yeah, I can't just let it go. I think I want to big up everything Taylor and Tiffany have just said. I want to call the name of Dorothy Bolden. I was co-founder of the National Domestic Workers in 1968. I want to name that I like to put ourselves in the bodies of workers, domestic workers, laundress, women in what they call the Black Washing Society in 1881, who found the wherewithal to know their worth and stand on dignity to fight for their worth. It's, in this current moment, sometimes it's hard to understand, I think, the courage, the clarity of self and courage that it takes to say, to stand up for what your dignity and your worth is. And I think of my grandmother, who was also a domestic worker, and taught me that, someone with a 7th grade education, who her whole life did work in service of the others, could also stand like a queen, right? And like that is something that Black people in general continually insist throughout history.
Absolutely. Sharika, come on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tiffany, for lifting up folks that we are still doing the work with today. And so I want to lift up one of my mentors, P.D. Talley. And I want to talk about Ohio, the not so distant past. I'm not going to take it to 1934 or 81, but just in 2011, then Governor John Kasich signed into law Senate Bill 5, right, which was designed to limit the collective bargaining rights of public unions. And so in a historic repeal effort, Ohio voters overwhelmingly rejected Senate Bill 5, and it would not have happened without P.D. Talley, who was then Secretary Treasurer of the Ohio AFL-CIO. She worked to organize our community support in the referendum fight. What P.D. did at the table, centering Black people in the intersection of race and class, was so important. I'm on a panel with other Black folks, so I know y'all have folks in y'all family who have the good state jobs, or, are a letter carrier or work down at the county. And so public sector jobs for so many Black people have moved us out of poverty. And so PD centering our stories and lifting up Black people and making sure that the campaign involved us and that we were leading the campaign was so important, because Senate Bill 5 would have been devastating for all workers in Ohio, but especially us. And so her leadership was critical to successfully beating right to work. And it continues to offer me and other folks powerful lessons on, the work we can do to continue to derail anything trying to take away our labor rights.
Y'all got me about to shout. We just got started. But of course, this panel, I don't know that and I said this to my comrades earlier, I haven't been on a panel with all Black women talking about labor ever in decades worth of work. So of course we ended up calling the roll. And of course we named, my grandmama was a domestic worker on the Lookout Mountain in Tennessee that Martin Luther King talked about in his I Have a Dream speech. And my Black Panther mom couldn't get a job anywhere except the Postal Service. So, and shout out to the incredible work that letter carriers and clerks are doing all over the country. Some of the tip of the spear work in the labor movement. So just know we see you, and for all of you all that are calling in from non-majority locals that are making it do what it do in right to work states, we see you. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much, panelists, for bringing in our elders and ancestors who, in no small way, are the reason that we can do the work that we're doing today and do it so damn well. So thank you so much for bringing them into this sacred room, virtual room with us. Sharika, I want to go back to you for this next question. And then maybe Tiff, if you don't mind jumping in, I'm curious about what both of you in particular have to say to this question around, we know that a concrete analysis of concrete conditions is that Black people have been and are currently at the forefront of some of the most historic fights that are going on in the country right now, some of which are particularly labor, right? Like we know that when we talk about Ferguson and we're talking about who was in the streets, we know the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists were out in the streets. They were the tip of the spear, right? That we wouldn't have gotten an AFL-CIO president talking about what was happening in Ferguson if it wasn't for his members being out. in the streets. But we know, particularly as it relates to some of the most historic labor battles that we've seen in this country, thinking about the Amazon fight, thinking about some of the Starbucks workers, thinking about some of the UAW fights and more, when you look at who is leading, you see Black faces, people who look and live and love like us, where we look and love and live, right? And so I want you to talk about the ways that Black organizers are at the forefront of labor movements in this moment. So if you don't mind, Sherika, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, Ash, I'll jump in real quick. I'm a local president of CBTU, which is the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, right? And so a few months back, we had a gathering with leaders from across the country in Canada, and we talked about what it means for so many Black folks to be leading international national unions. And, you know, you mentioned the AFL-CIO and what it means to have Fred Redmond, a Black man, as our secretary treasurer, right? Who's out of the Steelworkers Union. And so like overnight, we went from like 1 or 2 Black labor leaders to like double digits. And so for me as a Black organizer, as a young Black labor leader, I, in this moment, is just so excited about it, because them being in leadership, it is opening doors for me in terms of like how I organize and like being willing to like take more risks and do things a little differently. Because like as a Black person, like I'm always doing things differently. And so like their impact has been so important for me to like have folks who look like me, who will support my leadership and like allow me the space to grow and do things, you know, differently. And so because they understand what we're trying to do, and it is literally liberation for our Black and brown bodies.
It's a new day, and not without a lot of work and sacrifices from even including some of the women on this call to make that so. So thank you for naming that. Tiffany, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I have 2 thoughts, and I'm going to try not to go on for too long. And I'm going to try not to cry, because everybody knows, what does Tiffany Flowers always do?
A crier.
But I'm going to start off by, of course, naming our good brother, Chris Smalls. I mean, my God, what a story at Amazon. And I mean, when you talk about the devil came to steal, kill, and destroy not only his soul, his family, his ability to earn money, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal teams trying to destroy this man's future. And the fact that his colleagues and this moment and possibility meant so much to him, and that he stayed the course without the support of big labor. As I understand, the Amazon workers are still shopping for a big labor home. And I'm just so deeply inspired by that, and what the ripple effect of what Chris's leadership has demonstrated, because to Sherika's point, he doesn't look like a typical leader. To Taylor's point, people automatically think labor isn't for us. Chris is very much for us, right? And he's been crystal clear about that from day one. And I'm inspired by that. I'm inspired, again, going back to what Roxy said about the young Black workers, particularly in Starbucks, the baristas, the people who are sick and tired of being sick and tired of the way that they're being treated and underpaid. And they're leading on the Starbucks Workers United campaign. Shout out to y'all. It's just amazing. And then because we know labor and we know compliance, our dear sister Sherika cannot actually talk about what an actual rock star she really is, and what a true labor leader she really is, in that right now, listeners, Sherika and April Sims are running for office in Washington State as the first Black woman team to run for actual office. That very woman, Petey, that Sherika just mentioned, is a state vice president, and that's what Sherika is running to do. But because Sherika joined this panel at work and in labor, there are lots of rules that govern what we can talk about, when and where. They can get us in a lot of trouble. She couldn't tell you that, but I can. So I want you to do me a favor, and please, please take some time, if you can, to go on Vote Labor's Future, VOTLABORS Future, FUTURE.com, and find out more about these real-time leaders right now in Washington State. They're in full-on campaign mode, and I'm just so proud. I've known Sherika for a long time. I've watched her grow up and grow into her leadership, and I'm just so thrilled about it. So I'm going to stop there. But there are leaders doing it right now in real time. And Sherika, we're so proud of you.
We're so proud of you. And look at Black women making it do what it do, what the state thought they would hamper, what these rule makers thought they would stop. we can organize our way around it. So thank you, Tiffany, for raising it. And I'm gonna go a step further. Go on the website, votelaborsfutures.com, and follow the social media handles, amplify what you see there, and from all of these other orgs and individuals that have been shouted out on the call today, and that will be called out as we go on. But I also want to say y'all should drop a dime on that donation plug right there. You should drop it. Make it rain, because we're trying to get our people in these seats. Y'all saw what just happened this week. We need more people that can make more decisions, that can control budgets, that can do all sorts of stuff. And we need to support the Black women who are putting their own lives on the line to sacrifice to be in those seats. So Sharika, we salute you. I want to move us to the next question because I have so many questions for y'all in a limited amount of time. Obviously the movement for Black Lives believes in a plethora of tactical interventions for the sake of Black liberation. And one of those is around policy. The InfraBL policy table I would put up against any policy shop in the world, right? We are trying to demand, and I'm saying that as a person who, honestly, when we started InfraBL was like, oh, that policy stuff is for, the liberals. I'm a revolutionary. And now I'm like, man, thank God for the policy table. Thank God for the vision for Black lives. Thanks God for the sort of policy wonks that can give us literal law, legal language around our demands and turn it into policy, right? So I want to sort of take a second to think about and share with the audience, what are some of the policy fights that we should be paying attention to and looking at in this moment that have the potential to impact the state of Black workers? Sharika, again, I want to hear your thoughts, but maybe Taylor, if you don't mind starting us off, I'd really be excited to hear what you thought about this.
I would definitely love to start us off. As an organizer with the National Black Workers Center, I would love to just highlight what we're doing right now. So, Black workers right now are needing some type of structural support. So we envision that as a bill that seeks to undo the legacy of slavery and intergenerational poverty, that supports the essential and low wage workers who risk their lives every day to keep our country fed and functioning, but really lack the resources and labor protections to support themselves and their families. That looks like our Black Worker Bill of Rights. Although Black workers are and always have been essential workers, our visions and our solutions are not adequately highlighted and considered in national policy. So our National Black Worker Center Black Worker Bill of Rights policy will really try to codify all of the elements of Black worker protections that we've seen from our workers and through our policy work that are necessary. We have to put pressure on the state and supporters of the state to ensure that the barriers for Black workers for being employed and employed specifically in quality jobs are limited. So, we create our own tables, our own spaces when it comes to Black workers and leading and driving policy initiatives. So when it comes to the policies that we design, if it's designed without us and they don't center us, they will not help us. And we acknowledge that and we set those policies aside. So we have an opportunity after we are able to put those things aside to build an anti-racist economy that really works for everyone. Something I think mentioned before about the fact that when Black workers are benefited, everybody is benefited. The policies that we advocate for are really serving the purpose of moving us toward that new economy that centers Black workers, equity, care, and workers' well-being. So our policy platform will really support workers building power and strengthening our influence in the national policy landscape and ensuring that it actually results in material support and outcomes for folks. So, the legislation that we drafted with our coalition members and the constituents includes, but it's not limited to, things like rights to organize, the rights to dignity, the rights to equitable wages and compensation that's owed, and the right to health, healing, and rest. We see this bill as an opportunity not only to create a solidified right for Black folks, but also as an opportunity to organize and ignite folks, to remind them of what they're owed by their government, by their community, and everything else.
You know, Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. And our good sis, Charlene Carruthers, said, power concedes nothing without an organized demand. And I would go further to say power concedes nothing without an organized demand and a consequence. And what we have with this Bill of Rights for Black workers is an organized demand. And what we have in terms of consequence is the power of Black worker organizing, which you're hearing about today. Sharika, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, thank you. Taylor, I appreciate so much what you said about like centering Black folks in the creation of policy and like just doing this work. And here in Washington State at the State Labor Council this past January, going into legislative session, we dropped the Racial Equity and Policy Toolkit, like lifting that up and naming it, that as folks putting together policy, as labor putting together policy, we absolutely have to center the voices of Black, Indigenous people of color. And so we're excited about doing the work and continuing it this session and the next. And so I really want to lift up a national policy piece, the PRO Act. Nearly half of all non-union workers, more than 60 million people would join the union today if given a chance, right? And we see with this wave of organizing, like folks want to join the union. And so the PRO Act would empower workers to exercise our freedom to organize and bargain. It would ensure that workers reach a first contract quickly after a union is recognized, because we know as organizers, the pressure the boss will put on folks trying to just get that first contract and, you know, just dragging it along, right? It'll end the practice of punishing striking workers by hiring permanent replacements. Y'all remember what the young folks did with Kellogg and like flooding with all those applications, you know, when they were trying to hire replacements, right? And so it gives us an opportunity to speak up for labor rights. You know, we shouldn't be losing our jobs because we want to organize. It'll also hold corporations accountable by strengthening the National Labor Relations Board and allowing it to penalize employers who retaliate against striking working people, right? We saw what happened with our good brother Chris and like him losing his job, right? And so definitely want to lift that up, like how we hold corporations accountable. And like I lifted up earlier, in terms of right to work, it will repeal right to work. Right to work is divisive and it is a racist law that was created during the Jim Crow era, and it leads to lower wages, fewer benefits, and more dangerous workplaces. And so I just want to lift those things up as a few pieces of the PRO Act and why we need it, because it is going to create pathways for so many people, for workers to form unions without fear.
Thank y'all so much. And again, just to say it again, so you know where to look, I want you to check out the Black Worker Bill of Rights and the PRO Act. And particularly for the PRO Act, we need you calling all your elected officials and telling them that you're supportive of this thing, because we need it. We need it. We need it. Roxy, this next question is for you. And again, folks, feel free to get in where you fit in if you have something you want to add to this question. But, you know, what we know, again, in terms of like concrete analysis of the conditions that Black workers are working in right now, is that corporate elitists are doing everything in their power to consolidate their wealth and power at the expense of working people, and to adjust and evolve to continue to interfere in our labor fights. Again, we're going to keep on picking on Starbucks, but the Starbucks president his recent listening tour, right? Or thinking about Amazon's recent promotion of increased benefits for non-union workers, and all this covert and overt ways that, you know, sometimes we've talked about even on this call, but that we know are happening probably to a much greater extent in the world as we know it. And so I want to create some space to highlight some of those tactics that you've witnessed, Roxy, or that you're aware of, that corporate elitists are using to thwart this work, to stop the building of Black worker power. And I want you to talk a little bit further about like, how do we work around it and disrupt it so that we actually can win?
Thank you so much, Ashley. I want to actually take a step back because I was like chomping at the last question. So give me a second just to say, I think sometimes when we talk about policy that's about workers organizing, it's hard to animate for people sort of like what the impact of that is if they're not inside labor. And so I think about the Amazon workers particularly, who are now, I think Tiffany said, are shopping for a big labor organization. So as Sharika said, that they can actually achieve a contract. And I think about just if people could just imagine what it was like for truck drivers 50 years ago, that was not a middle-class job. And that the opportunity and the leadership that the Amazon workers have created is, if we can organize Amazon across the country, the same reality that the Teamsters saw making trucking jobs a middle-class job is what's possible for jobs like for Amazon workers, but then across the economy. So what has been done is so consequential, and the two bills that Taylor and Sharika are talking about, right, are so critical. So I just really wanted to say that. And then to the question about union busting, right? How the corporatists, what strategies they use. We know what the strategies are. They're like basically carrots and sticks, right? You know, they try to promise workers the world, or they do captive audiences to, you know, put fear into workers. And it's not new tactics, you know, it's not really new tactics they're using. It's the same tactics in different ways. And I think as labor organizers, we know what to do in that situation, right? We inoculate, we build strong structures inside the facilities that we're organizing, in deep relationships. And then we organize for compression with speed, right? To like get to the contract, right? Get to that part of the fight. The thing that I see, I don't know if you guys, I'm like probably aging myself, but one of my favorite movies is The Devil's Advocate. There's a part in The Devil's Advocate where Pacino goes, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled off was to convince the world he didn't exist. And when I think about this question, that's what I think corporations have done, right? It's amazing, right? You remember like Mitt Romney back in the day talking about, he was running against Obama, you know, I built it, and this whole thing about them building it. And while they built it, they're taking corporate welfare, but they're not just doing that. They're taking corporate welfare and then like convincing the masses that social welfare is a problem, right? And so that dynamic to me is the way I see corporations today pitting workers against each other and convincing workers that what we deserve is not what we deserve. And I think the way we shift that is by doing the long-term work of changing people's hearts and minds about what we deserve, right? And agitating people about what we deserve. So the world, the ideological frame that we've all bought into, right, is that government needs to be small, we are individuals, and the free market solves all problems. And if we don't find a way to switch that ideological frame to, you know, we can create an authentic democracy. You know, individualism is not the way, because interdependency is the only thing that actually truly exists. And that markets in service of the good and for the many are actually possible. If we don't make that shift, we will never truly create the liberated society and liberate our people in the way that we need to. So for me, it's less about the tactics and what the boss is doing, and more about that structural worldview that we need to shift.
I mean, that was the benediction right there. Girl, you read my mind, Sissy. I was about to say pass the plate. That's it right there. Y'all know the movement for Black Lives don't believe there's no freedom for Black people under an economy that would prioritize profit over people. Period. On period. Thank you, Roxy. I want to stay kind of in this vein around like what are the racial dynamics of the labor movement right now? You know, like, is there a relationship between big unions and these localized union efforts? And are there racial dynamics that we should be aware of that are impacting our ability to successfully organize Black workers, and to organize together as Black workers who believe that all labor is valuable? You know, how do Black organizers within this labor movement navigate those dynamics? And I'd love to hear from all of y'all, in part because y'all are all active to some degree and have been active over different seasons, ebbs and flows of the multiple labor movements. I mean, I know several of us have stints in multiple different locals or worker centers, and et cetera. So I'd love to hear all of your thoughts to this question. And y'all know I'll be democratic for a minute, see if somebody jumps in. If nobody jumps in, I'll call on.
I'm happy to jump in. I love this question. I always, because I'm like I said, I'm from Grenada, and I moved to America at 7. And I got here, and coming from a place where Black folks are the majority, like 98% of people around you are Black, and coming into a place where you're marginalized, it is very apparent nothing exists, right, without racism in it in this country. It's impossible. And so, yes, our labor institutions they're racist. And that is a hard thing for labor leaders to like confront. But speaking for SEIU and 1199 SEIU, we are grappling with it as a large organization, and we're trying to find our way. And there's still a lot of work to do. And for me, right, how do we, like the scrappiness of the Amazon workers and the freedom to innovate and create, I think there's something in that needs to be replicated, right? That, like, how do you build, independent structures that can go out and do the thing, but then recognizing we live in a system with global corporations, and that at some point, if you do want a contract, you need to come in. And so, as an organizer in a labor organization, my first task is my own personal mastery and understanding how I hold oppression, so that when I'm leading space and holding space and creating structures, that they are as liberated as possible, but also to be able to reflect on in an honest way that when it's not, right? And have the practices in place to deal with that. So, I think if we really want to make the shift, we sort of have to build the plane while we're flying it, build the bridge while we're walking on it, hold up the mirror, hold people accountable, demand change, but understand that inherent to this country, there aren't systems that we're building that aren't racist without conscious effort to do something different. And I think that's sort of what resonates for me.
That's a word. Anything any of the other panelists would add to this question before we move?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I appreciate what Roxy said, like our institutions are inherently racist. And, for me as a Black labor leader, like the other day I was having a conversation with someone. I'm like, I am doing this for love, right? I am showing up to places that were not built for me every single day. I'm not doing it kicks and giggles, like this is out of love, a labor, a love. And so here at the Washington State Labor Council, we have our program, Race and Labor, where we are having the hard conversations about race and racism in our institutions. And so I just want to shout out April Sims, who is our Secretary Treasurer, who has been leading this work since 2016. And because of the commitment of the delegates to our conventions, we passed 3 resolutions, but just the commitment from our affiliates in terms of a culture shift, we were able to hire a director of racial and gender justice who has taken our training from an 8-hour training, but it is a full campaign where we are training, rank and file members to have these conversations, but we're not only training them, y'all, we are paying them to also do this work. Because often as Black folks and people of color, it's like, okay, do it for free. No, right? And so, making sure that it is a full scale campaign, and, the unions here in Washington State are committed to this culture shift, right? It is not happening overnight. Like I said, it's been going on since 2016, but like we are putting in the work, and I am excited about, the opportunities, to just continue to change our labor movement and make sure that we are organizations that are practicing and being anti-racist every single day.
Y'all missed your shout right there. It was right there. You had every opportunity to get your praise on for Black folks getting paid to do this racial and gender. And mind you, the question was about race, but we could have had a whole nother panel on gender and race and ableism in labor. We could have talked about all the isms. but you missed your opportunity to shout because you had a concrete example of somebody's doing something about it and practicing what they preach around the value of that work. So thank you for that opportunity. I said it again to give you another opportunity in the chat to say amen to somebody. Tiffany Flowers, what do you think?
You know, the only thing I really want to add, and this is like direct to camera for you Black organizers working in these troubled organizations sometimes, because that was my role for many, many years. I started off in the labor movement, honestly, as an officer's kid. And when I got involved career-wise, I was in OIT and worked my way up to being a vice president and an organizing director. And all of that time, I never left the field. I never stopped knocking on doors. I never stopped writing campaign plans. I never stopped running my numbers. I never stopped going to debrief. And I never, ever, ever stopped getting second guessed, even though I never lost. And so what I would say to you, my friends, my comrades, my brothers, sisters, nibblings, and siblings that are still doing this work is follow your instinct. When you're organizing, there are a lot of people that are going to try to tell you how to talk to our folks. And you know that at the end of the day, that's not going to get you where you need to be. And so what I would say, Auntie is not telling you to lose your job, but I am telling you that you have ancestral knowledge, you have tools, you have things inside of you that lead your instincts. And that's what makes you the wonderful organizer that you are. So all I'm asking you to do in these organizations, in those lonely moments, in those times where you find yourself fighting for your campaign, you find yourself fighting for the workers that you're organizing, you find yourself fighting with comms over messaging that you know isn't going to land, follow your instincts and stay in the fight. That's why you're there. Don't be discouraged. It's going to be the thing that's going to get you where you need to be. And I just beg of you to please hold your line, follow your instincts, and ultimately you will prevail. Trust me.
That's right. As many of us in the movement for Black Lives might offer, you are on assignment. You are on assignment. Taylor, I want to see if there's anything you want to add to circle this question out before we start to move to our next one.
Yeah, let me see. I was just thinking that when it comes to organizing in the workplace, that, you know, like our previous conversations, I think that we have like a historical context to look back at to inform the way that we move forward. So, you know, successful organizing really is relational, you know, it's one-on-one communication, it's a dynamic of trust. And, you know, it's this idea that like, I have your back, you got mine. So when I think of organizing on the small scale, even to the big one, I think those are the things to keep in mind and like to have as an importance in the front. And then when it comes to, you know, sometimes we might like be pulled towards the idea of like celebrity endorsements and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's the people on the ground, you know, and the jobs that matter when it comes to like making or breaking campaigns. And, you know, I also just wanted to add that, you know, Black workers have to assert the importance of like an intersectional and racial justice lens when it comes to approaching our labor organizing, and really like reframing this issue as one that's like, that requires a holistic approach and a transformative one, rather than one that's like incremental or I guess like appeasing to the status quo. But yeah.
A whole entire word on this last question. Thank you all. So before we close, I want to ask a question, then I'll give you all an opportunity to just say some brief last remarks. I'm going to call this the "so you want to start a union" question. If I want to organize in my workplace, you know, and we're seeing again this, you know, I think if people had asked about it a couple of years ago, people would have said, you know, unions are dying, worker centers, you know, they're not going to be able to sustain themselves, blah, blah, blah. People wouldn't be talking about this sort of renaissance in worker struggle that we're seeing contemporarily in a similar way that people didn't believe that we would ever get to a point where we were having uprisings that were led by Black workers in 2020, right? But now we're seeing it. And I think people are starting to have faith again and believe that we can actually have a sustainable, powerful Black worker movement in the United States. If I'm thinking about, I came to this call because I saw your beautiful faces on the promos and the graphics, and I wanted to know, how do I do it where I work? I want you to tell me, what are the first 3 steps that you would encourage me to take? What cautions would you give me as I took them? And again, I'd love to hear quickly from each of you an answer to these 2 questions.
So I'm going to say the first thing is, don't be doubtful. Eradicate your doubt. And there's a union. There are people in almost every single line of work in this country are organized. And I know that's hard to believe because there were so many years that unions were not at the forefront. I would say, if you have access to the internet, which a lot of us do, go and Google like what you do for a living, type it in literally, and type in union, and you'll get a plethora of information. And I would really I'd reach out to what seemed like it fit: the Amalgamated Transit Unions, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, where Roxy is, the Service Employees Union, represents everybody. And I mean everybody, from doctors and nurses to clerical workers. Just because a union doesn't necessarily say, record retail worker store, doesn't mean there's not a place for you. After you reach out to that union, what they will probably do is have an organizer call you. And that is your chance to ask every burning desire question that you have about how to get this started. And I mean everything from, can I get fired, to how much will this cost, to what does it take, and where do I go, and who will find out, and what can my boss do? Put your list together and be ready to have the conversation of your life, because if you're really serious about this, it's going to be the choose your own adventure, the first open door of the choose your own adventure of your life, because they're going to tell you that you have to be very brave, and you have to talk to coworkers that you trust and who you think want to build this thing with you. So what I'm going to caution you to do is be ready, because once you make that call, people are going to respond to you very seriously, because they're going to think that you're very serious about forming a union in your workplace. And I know we throw the word organizer around for so many fields, but there are people that work in the labor movement whose only job is to answer that call when you call. That's their only job. That's what I did for a long time. Plenty of people that we know, people on this call, do it right now. And so it's hard to believe, but there were people just waiting right now for you to call and say, I'm ready to make this change in my life. So be brave. You know how to reach us at the Movement for Black Lives. We're here to support you, help you, guide you, direct you, and be ready to open the door to a new life for yourself and your family.
Yes, thank you, Tiffany. Who'd like to go next?
Everything that Tiffany just said, that's right. There are folks who that is their job, just waiting for you to call. If you click on any union's website, it'll say join a union, right? Click on it. But I would also offer, talk to your coworkers. 9 out of 10 times, like, their issues on the job are your issues. So have those conversations with your coworkers, because the union is literally us, working people coming together. Know your rights. You have the right to join in a union. And I would lift up what Roxy said earlier about we deserve, y'all. And so dream big. We don't want the floor. We want to smash through the ceiling. And lastly, I would just say, lift up there are so many folks who want to support, as Tiffany said. And so there's a room full of people who are ready to support you. And we are rooting for you to win. Your victory is our victory.
Absolutely. Thank you. Taylor, did I see you come off mute? You want to go next?
Yeah, I could hop in. I think when it comes to the ideas of things that we should impart to folks who are trying to organize in their community, first, I would say getting an understanding of your community. You want to make sure that you're understanding exactly what people want, understanding what the issues are, or the stresses within your community, so that you're addressing them directly, and not, I think specifically within this point, not replicating a white supremacist idea of telling people what they need, as opposed to addressing the needs that they tell you. And then I would think next up is inoculation. This idea that you want to let people know that this is not going to be an easy fight. It's not going to be something that is going to be done next week. there may be, campaigns and efforts that have losses, but they will be, minor setbacks for a major comeback. And reminding people to remain engaged because the system that we're going up against is not made for us to win. And then finally, developing a strategy to win, really trying to be principled and focused in the way that you approach your strategies or your campaigns, making sure that folks, because you are inviting them to do something that is, a little bit of a risk for themselves, making sure that it's something that has been thought through and something that they can really believe in as they, put themselves up, whether it be telling their stories or showing up to actions or things like that. So that's what I would say.
Roxy, bring us home.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about sort of like what I could add because everything Tiffany, Sharika, and Taylor said spot on. I think from an 1199 SEIU, we believe that organizing campaigns are about relationships and numbers, right? And so before you even call us, well, what we would say is you should know who's with you and talk to the people that you trust and feel the way you feel. Build your core, build your nucleus. And that we believe that charting, like our ability to chart our facilities and where you work and know who works on what shifts and that's critical, right? To be able to win a union election. And then the idea of how we communicate with each other, right? The numbers and then the relationship, starting to think like people are doing things like creating WhatsApp groups with those, the coworkers who are with you. You don't have to wait for a big labor organization to come in, right? You can start your organizing by taking those steps. And then once you have that, calling an organ, like Tiffany said, and saying, we're ready. You know what I mean? Because like Sharika said, the union, it's you, it's yours. And so you're calling folks in to help facilitate and educate. But the leadership, the driving of it has to be anchored from you.
While I give my panelists an opportunity to catch their breath because they just dropped so much gold wisdom on you in the last hour or so. I just want to remind folks that because I imagine some of us maybe are coming to this conversation being like, yo, I don't really know a lot about the labor movement or workers' struggles. And some of you are coming because you've heard really terrible things about white supremacist culture and patriarchy and labor. And you wanted to see if we were just going to talk trash. And maybe some of y'all are actually in management of organizations and you were just coming to hear about the wave of unionization that's happening. What I want to say to you is that there is a wave of unionization happening. And oh, how exciting that is. Oh, the opportunities that allows for us, and oh, the possibilities, the impossible things that we might be possible if we work together thinking about how do we build cooperative economies, new social solidarity economies that centers the presence and the priority of all of our labor. What an imaginative, wonderful, joy-filled world that would be if we actually stopped listening to white supremacist capitalists who told us that unions were bad words, right? This is an opportunity, and you just heard it from some of the baddest Black women I know in the game. So this is an opportunity for us to be hyped, to be thirsty. If you're not joining a union yet, you should. If you're not organizing one, you ought to. But even if you're still just in the curiosity phase, you now have 4 incredible women to follow who can tell you from their pages exactly why you ought to be excited about being a part of this movement for workers' rights. So please, please, please take the time to check out and follow each and every one of them and the organizations that they represent. And now, before we wrap, and I give you the call to action and benediction, I want to take a second just to get any last words from this brilliant panel. And Taylor, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you.
No, I'm happy to. I just want to say that I'm so grateful to be in the space with fellow Black women who are deeply invested in the labor movement. I believe that with us at the helm of everything, that it's inevitable that we will win. And I try to move through my day with that idea, that it's our duty to fight for our freedom, it's our duty to win, you know? So I'm just excited to be a part of this. And I really thank y'all so much for having me.
Thank you for being here with us. Sharika, you're next.
Yeah, my final words is really it's for the labor movement. If we are going to create an economy that works for all people, we cannot allow racism to divide us. Racism is a system of oppression designed to divide the working class so the wealthy elite can consolidate their power at the very top. Right. And so I wanted to lift that definition up to affirm that race isn't a biological distinction, but is a combination of belief, ideas, and institutions that have been used to divide and oppress people to, you know, so the elites can consolidate their profits and power. In that scenario, corporations will continue to win, right? If we allow racism to divide the working class. And so our power lies as working people lies in our ability to come together in union across race and place. Building power as a labor movement requires that all working class people are supportive. An inclusive, unified, and anti-racist labor movement is one where all working people have a place in the union. Our voices are heard. We are building a bigger table where all working people have a voice. It's how we win. Strength and power at the bargaining table, the ability to organize more working people, and strong community coalitions is what awaits us on the other side when we do the work to become actively anti-racist organization. And so that is how we win. That is how we are stronger. And that is how we grow our power.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tiffany Flowers, tell me something good.
Not that I have to go after Sharika.
I love you, sis. I love you, sis.
No, I mean, you know, honestly, it's what a joy, what a real joy to be in the space with all of you. And I want to really honestly lift up the movement for Black Lives for creating this space. If we don't do this work to get this information to our community in an accessible way, honestly, we know nobody else will. So thank you all for pulling this together in this incredible group of leaders. And what Ash said, honestly, guys, folks, friends, I'm just here for you. My handle is public. Reach out to me if you have a question. I'm happy to help. Labor is my first love. Sharika's trying to lure me back over there, but it's my first love, and I do believe it's the only way that working people in this country have a chance to truly be at the table and create conditions that make all of our lives more comfortable, happy, and livable. So thank you, M4BL. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Ash, for holding us and guiding us. And I'm always here, friends. Reach out to me. I'm happy to help you learn how to organize.
Yes, it's true. She's like the most available and accessible human on the planet. Roxy Nelson, come on and circle us up.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to have gotten to be in space with all of you. It is not every day that you get to share space as a labor leader with a panel of all Black women. And so that was really good for my soul. And Ashley, thank you for holding space for us. And thank you to Movement for Black Lives for creating this opportunity. One of my historical mentors is Ella Baker. And she has a quote that says, "Give light and the people will find the way." And for me, I have it on my wall, and I'm offering it to young organizers listening to us, labor organizers, community organizers, political organizers, whoever you are, as a way to center yourself in the belief that our role as organizers is to facilitate, to be servant leaders and to facilitate. And that if we do that, people have what they need if they work collectively, and will be able to find their way. And so I would like to leave everybody with that.
Thank you so much from that word. We are grateful that you all made time, and one of the busiest times of my life, and I'm certain That's true for each of you. Thank you so much for being here with us. To our interpretation team, thank you all so much for being here. To the comms team who made tonight possible. InfraBL has the best comms team in the game. I don't care. Fight me, because they are amazing. And to all of the membership and member leaders of the Movement for Black Lives ecosystem and all of the staff, thank you so much for the impossible things that you make possible by continuing to say yes to choosing being together and stronger than individual and weaker. We are grateful for what you do. Just also want to remind people that building worker power is the answer to every issue, and building Black liberation is the answer to every issue, that these things are intimately related. I just want to be clear that we're not just talking about organizations that recruit people. We know that that's a narrative that people have to say about labor. This ain't just about recruitment, though I do believe in organizations that got more than one member, right? However, this is about organizing to build Black power. That is what we are about. So if you are an individual and organization that is looking to find a home with other individuals and organizations that are about that life, I need you to come on and join the Movement for Black Lives. And I need you to connect with the organizations that you saw represented on this panel or shouted out by these incredible panelists. It is time for us to build a robust and sustainable organizing movement of Black workers. You can be a part of that. And if maybe, organizing workers isn't your jam, guess what? We've got every single kind of sector in the Movement for Black Lives. And just because I know a bunch of y'all are also watching that are allies to this work, co-conspirators in this work, that just wanted to see what the Blacks are going to talk about tonight. Also want to make sure that you know that there is a home for you. You can check out the Frontline. Shout out to Tiffany Flowers. That's the gang. You can also check out the Rising Majority. What we know is that we need a Black-led, multiracial, multi-sector united front to fight back against the vestiges of fascism. So come on in the room and join us. Last but certainly not least, I want to remind you that if you want to stay in touch about this issue and more, you can text LABOR, LABOR, to 90975. Again, text LABOR to 90975 to learn more about the Black Workers Bill of Rights, which you heard Taylor talk about earlier. And you can hear more about InfraBL's vision for a liberated future for all Black workers and an economy that prioritizes our people over profit, works for all of our people to build healthy and sustainable and equitable communities that we all deserve. So check out the Black Worker Bill of Rights, check out the InfraBL Economic Justice Platform and the Vision for Black Lives, check out the PRO-ACT, check out each of these individuals, their orgs, the campaigns that you heard them raise, and definitely don't forget, go to votelaborsfuture.com, follow them on socials, donate, spread the word. We love you all. Thank again, all of our panelists. Give it up for them in the chat. I love you. I respect you. I want you to be free. We'll see you in the streets. Peace, good people.